Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something super fun and practical. So if you're getting started with Go programming language, or just Golang as a lot of folks call it in modern words, we're gonna build a simple command line interface, or CLI calculator, right from the scratch. I will be coding it live in my editor, explaining every single line of code as we go. So like why we do it that way, and even running it to show you how it works in an action. This project is going to be perfect for beginners because it covers all the essentials for the beginners, like loops, user input, error handling, switches, control flow, and much more, without any kind of fancy frameworks or external libraries. So without further ado, let's get started. So first things first, make sure you have Go installed on your machine. If not, head to go.dev website on your browser and download the latest version. It's like 1.22 or 23 or whatever by now, and install it. It shouldn't be very difficult to install. You should be good to go with the installation procedure. So once installed, open up your terminal and type Go version to check to see if it has been installed correctly on your machine. So if it says something like this, the Golang version you have currently installed on your machine, then you are good to go. So cool. For this tutorial, I'll be using VS Code because I love VS Code with its Go extensions. So if you don't like VS Code, you can use any other code editor or IDE you like. But for this tutorial, I'll stick to VS Code. So I have already created this folder called tutorial on my desktop, and I have already opened it up in my VS Code. So after that, open up your terminal and say Go mod init and give it some kind of name for your project. For this case, I'm gonna say Go Calculator and hit enter. This command sets up your module in Go like a simple project. This is super important for Go to manage different kinds of dependencies for your project. Even though we are not using any kind of extras here, it is always a good idea to follow best practices. So let's clear our terminal and close it. Okay, let's create our file called main.go. So main.go. And this file is going to contain all the code of our simple calculator project. So every program in Go starts with the package main declaration. So let's add one to our file as well. That declaration basically tells Go that this is an executable program, not a library. So next up, we have to import some of the libraries that we will need in this project, in this simple program. So in this program, we will need only one library that is called FMT. So let's import that. FMT is the library that is responsible for formatting and getting user input from the console. It is similar to printf from C or cout from C++, but it is way nicer than that. So we will use it for all our prints and scans. No other inputs needed here. Go's standard library is that powerful, so we can implement all the necessary stuff for our project with only this FMT library imported. Now that we have to create the heart of our program, which is this main function. Go is a compiled language, that's why we have to specify this main entry point for our every program. We do have this kind of main function in other languages as well, like Java, C, C++, C#, Rust, Kotlin, and so on and so forth. That's why this main is the kind of main entry point. Go runs this when you execute the binary of your project. So inside here, let's start with a simple welcoming print line statement. So fmt print line. We will say here, welcome to a simple CLI calculator. This is a simple welcoming message that we will print to the console at the beginning of our program. So let's now save this file and try to run it to see what kind of result we get. So open up the terminal and say go run main.go, or go run just dot. Dot says run this current project that we have here or current module, but go run main.go specifically states to run this go file. So you can choose either of those commands. So I'll go with go run main.go. So when you run this, you have this welcoming message that is being printed out on the console. That feels good, right? Next up, we want to declare some kind of variables that we will need throughout our program. Go is statically typed language, so we specify types up front. So the first variable that we will create is this option variable. So var option, and it is going to be of type int. So that variable is going to be responsible for our menu choice. For example, we will be able to select different kinds of options from a list, like the first one is going to be for addition, second one for subtraction, third one for multiplication, and so on and so forth. That's why we have to have some kind of way to determine what kind of option the user has selected. That's why we will store the user's selected option in this option variable. Next up, we define this result variable, which is going to be initially equal to 0.0. Using this short walrus operator declaration, we do not have to specify the type of our variable. This is a nice feature of Go that helps us to identify the data type of this variable automatically by the value that we specify to it. In our case, type of this variable is going to be float64. In Go, basically we have two floating point data types, float32 and float64. Here we specify this .0 because we want to indicate that we want our result to be a floating point number instead of an integer. But you may ask, we have two floating point numbers, how Go identifies which kind of value, which kind of data type to use? We have two floating point data types. So the answer for this question is simple. Go, first of all, determines that this result is going to be a floating point number, and the default data type for floating point numbers is float64. That's why data type of this variable is going to be automatically set to float64. So that's that. Now let's create this new two variables, number 1 and number 2. Both of them are going to be float64 data type. Those are going to be our two numbers that we will be calculating the values for. For example, value 1 can be 10 and value 2 can be 15. So if we select the addition operation, we will add those two numbers and store the result in this result variable. So we specified the data type of those two numbers as float64 as well, because our result is float64. That's why our data types should match with each other. And we are using floating point numbers for our numbers instead of integers because we want to calculate with a precision. For example, if we were to say 1.5 plus 3.5, our program will give a result of 5. But if we were to use integer data types instead of floating point data types, we would get here 4. That's why we are using floating point data types. Alright, after that we have to create our main loop. So we say for true. That's an infinite loop, simple way to keep the menu coming back until the user exits. In Go, we do not have any kind of while statements. That's why we have to use this for statement. For is like an alternative for both for loop and while loop. In Go, this for loop is that much versatile. So yeah, inside we print the menu of different options. So let's say fmt print line. First of all will be addition, the second one will be subtraction, then third one will be multiplication, then the first one will be division, then the last one finally is going to be exit. Okay, I'm gonna minimize this so you can see this clearly. That is going to be our menu of different options that we can select from. After each of this, how can I say, option, we specify this new line character because we want it to be nicely formatted and with new line characters. This is basically the new line character. It is going to move the cursor to the next line. So yeah, this formatting is essential here for us to be able to see all the different options nicely. Then after that we say fmt.print and we print this message, select an option. We say this one, we here print without this new line character at the end. That's why we are saying just print instead of print line. In case you didn't know, this print line automatically adds that new line character at the end. That's the difference between print and print line. Okay, that's that. Now we have to take a user input. So we do this by this if statement. If this underscore error equals to fmt.scan line, I'm gonna first of all type this line out and explain what is going on in this line step by step. So scan line option and semicolon error does not equal to nil. We say here fmt print line invalid option and say continue here. So now let's talk about this if statement in a great detail. This scan line reads the user input to this option integer variable that we have created up here. Then it returns as a result two values. So here we are unpacking those two values to two different variables. So this is the first one is the number of items that scan line has received. So num of items, and the second one is the error message. If we have any kind of error message, then this error will be set to of type this error. So after taking that user input, we check if error does not equal to nil, which basically indicates that we had some kind of error reading the user input. But we, as you can see here, we do not use this number of items variable. That's why we are passing here underscore just to ignore this variable's value. If we have some kind of error, then we will enter this if statement and print invalid option message and continue to loop back in our infinite loop. This is just a smart error handling right away, which prevents any kind of crashes. For example, user could potentially enter some kind of invalid garbage like this one instead of a valid option. That's why we have to check that stuff before we continue proceeding that option. Alright, now this syntax is a little syntactic sugar that Go provides us, so we can say take this value on the same line and check that value on the same line. So that is a great feature that we have in Go programming language. Next, we have to validate this option value that we have received from the user further. So let's say if option is less than or equal to 0 or option is greater than 5, we will basically print fmt print line invalid option one more time and continue similarly to this one. Even if the user enters some kind of valid number, for example 10 or 100 or 1 million, or some kind of negative value like -10 or -20, we are not sure that this value that we received is valid. So for example, we have only 5 options here in our list. So if user chooses some kind of 100th option, then that option is invalid. That's why we have to account for that as well. So we are checking if option is less than or equal to 0 or option is greater than 5. We print this invalid option message and continue to the beginning of the loop. This basically keeps our program robust and makes sure we don't have any kind of panics in our program. So now we have to check this exit state, whether our user entered this 5 or not. So if option equals to 5, we right away want to break out of the program, which is basically going to exit this loop. So this is the clean break from the loop, so we don't have to specify any kind of external variables like running. Most programmers want to use this state at the top, so they say running, as I said, true, and they will keep running this loop while this running is set to true. Then they say here running just equals to false, and this approach is gonna basically quit this infinite loop on the next iteration. But my approach is a bit different, so you can consider that option as well. There's a bit different approach you can use as well. So now let's talk about input numbers. We have to take those two numbers as an input from the user to further calculate and do different operations on them. So let's say here fmt print line, not print line but just print, and enter the first number. Then we say if this one underscore and error equal to fmt scan line, to our number 1. Then if error does not equal to nil, we say here fmt print line invalid number and continue our loop. So this is the same pattern that we used like here. We try to get the user input, and if some kind of error occurs, we print that invalid number message and continue our loop. So let's duplicate that same code for our second number. So enter the second number. Notice that we do not validate a 0 for division yet, so we have to account for that as well, because for example, if the user selects this fourth option and the user types in 0 for the second number, we would get undefined behavior in our program, in our calculator. That's why we have to check that state as well. So if option equals to 4, which means that we want to divide and our number 2 equals to 0. In that case, we want to say fmt print line cannot divide by 0, and then we have to continue as well. That if statement check is going to make our program safer as well. Okay, now we have to do different operations on our two numbers depending on our option. So for that, we will be using a switch statement. So switch option. Switch is like an enhanced if statement in Go, not in just Go, but in any other programming language. So Go's switch statements are awesome. We do not need any kind of false rules by default like in C. So switch option, and we say case 1. We want to say here what? Result is going to be equal to number 1 plus number 2. And we want to display the result. Printf, we will be using printf statement here. Then let's say g plus g equals to g. Then provide our number 1, number 2, then our result. So this %g is a format specifier for floating point numbers that skips any trailing zeros. For example, if we have this kind of floating point number, this is going to skip all those trailing zeros that are not necessary in this case. For example, if we get some kind of 3.14 and a bunch of zeros, it is going to trail all those zeros and output this nicely formatted floating point number. So let's do the same thing for our other options as well. So in case 2, result is going to be equal to number 1 minus number 2. Then fmt print. Let's copy that. Also, we are missing here a new line character because printf does not add that new line character at the end by default. That's why we have to specify it manually. So let's paste it here, and the only difference is going to be this minus here. So let's copy that. Case 3, paste. This is going to be multiplication, then multiplication here as well. Then case 4, paste. Division and division here as well. Finally, outside the loop, output some kind of goodbye message. So let's say here fmt print line, and we are gonna say here just take care, which is basically a cute goodbye message that we want to give to our user. Alright, now let me scroll up, and our code is about 60 lines of code, and our syntax, our way of writing code is very clean, and our program is not error prone. Now let's try to run this program and check to see if it is going to work fine or not. So open up your terminal and say go run main.go one more time as we did previously. So we get this nice welcome message at the beginning, and we have nicely formatted list of all the different options that we can select in this simple calculator project. So let's start up with addition. I'm gonna pick 1 here and enter 10.5 for the first number and 4.2 for the second number, and our result is correct, 14.7. Sweet. Now let's try subtraction. So pick 2, then the first number is going to be 25, the second one is going to be 12.3. and we get the correct result. Now let's try to select division. Select 10 for the first number and 2 for the second number, we have 5, which is totally correct. Then multiplication. So let's try to select some kind of large number. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.678. And the second number is going to be 9.01. And that looks good as well. If we try to divide some kind of number by 0, we should get that error message. So let first number be 50 and the second number be 0. And we say we have here a nice error message that says cannot divide by 0. If we were to remove this part of code, we would get undefined behavior. It would have resulted in some kind of nan or infinity value. That's why we added these lines of code. So let's try to select some kind of invalid option. For example, let's say here some kind of string, and we have here invalid option. Then let's try to select 10, for example. Of course, this 10 does not exist in our options list. We should get this invalid option as well. So invalid option. Then let's try to go with some kind of negative value, for example -5. We get invalid option as well. Now if we say 5, we should be able to exit our program. Yeah, here it says take care. Alright, that was it for our simple calculator project in Golang. The code of this project is as always gonna be pushed to GitHub, and I'm gonna leave the link to it in the comment section down below so you can take that code and experiment on your own. So that's it. You have just built a simple working calculator in Golang. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. This was the first project in my Golang projects list. This projects list is going to be very large. So next up we will create a simple number guessing game in console. So stay tuned. Take care of yourself.